Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of Nutanix Weekly. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. I've got with me my trusty co-host, Jair Cox. Jair, how's it going?
Howdy. Doing okay. How are you?
I'm doing well. Can you believe we're already in the end of January? So 1/12 of 2021 is in the books.
Already. And for us, it's coming up on end of quarter, so we're all crazy busy.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you guys joining. So is this end of Nutanix's year or just end of the quarter?
No, coming up on end of the half, so it'll be end of our Q2.
Okay, so that's a pretty big point in time annually for you guys. So how long have you been at Nutanix now?
Be 3.5 years, real shortly.
Okay, so when you joined, so you came over from a partner, so you kind of had the concept of this end of quarter, end of year boom stuff going on.
Oh yeah,
and everybody runs around and everybody just takes a big sigh of relief.
Yeah, always, right? Yeah, that first week after the quarter, like every rep goes on vacation.
Yeah, it's funny. I try to do these like podcasts and things, and I try to work with Citrix and Nutanix and VMware and other people, salespeople, and everybody's like, "Oh, it's in the quarter, I can't talk to you." And then after that, it's, "Oh, it's the first of the quarter, I'm taking time off, can't talk to you." And then the week after that, it's, "Oh, we're starting to head towards the end of the quarter, I can't talk to you." It's like, oh my goodness.
Yeah,
but that's my world I live in. Well, I appreciate you joining as well, as always. Steve Kaplan is with us. Steve and Jaira and I were just talking about, Steve and I's background. Jaira's comment was, Steve and I are two of the most Citrix DNA-ish people that he knows. So I'm guessing there's going to be lots of connectivity between us along the way. I'm sure there is. Steve, how's it going?
It's going great, thanks.
Steve, what's your official title over at Nutanix?
Vice President of Customer Success Finance.
Customer Success. Say it one more time.
Vice President of Customer Success Finance.
You're saying
finance. Yeah.
So I'm part of the Customer Success organization.
Yeah.
And we run a finance team, a global finance team that works with customers across the globe doing ROI, TCO to help them evaluate disruptive technologies like Citrix, like Nutanix, like hybrid cloud.
So I'm gonna hit you with something real quick, which I think is extremely funny and something that shows up in my world almost every day. Like cutting edge or disruptive technologies like Citrix. I mean, you and I are both gray haired and wrinkles, and we've been around a long time. And the fact that I meet people every day that think of it as I just got off a customer success customer success business review with a customer, and he was explaining how his new parent company just doesn't think Citrix is real and how that can be possible, and it's cutting edge for them. And I'm going, oh my goodness, here we go again. It's like 20 years ago, starting over every other customer I run into.
Yeah, it takes a while. Virtualization has pretty much made it out there as mainstream. Although I was speaking with a customer last week that still has 350 physical servers, but for the most part, at least in the U.S., people are close to 100% virtualized.
Well, and that's really good you bring that up, because that really ties this conversation together here in a few minutes. But when you say virtual, you mean machine virtualization versus physical virtualization. And we're going to go into desktop and protocol delivery and all that stuff in a minute. But that concept of machine virtualization, 20 years ago, we were trying to talk people into that being the future, and people just flat out saying, no way, right?
Yeah, when I came from the channel side of the business, my first business was a Citrix channel partner, named the first partner of the year, sold that, then started a VMware consultancy and won some awards and so on. But that was in early 2005. And the biggest objection we would get in those days from IT people, you will never put my production server into a virtual machine.
Right. Yeah. And what's funny, if you go find those same people now, they're probably some of the biggest champions of that technology. Because once they embraced it, they probably embraced the heck out of it.
Yeah, although I like to give the example, the interesting thing is that Gartner, who's in the business of projecting IT trends, years ago they saw what was happening with virtualization in the public cloud space, and they retired their Magic Quadrant now almost 4 years ago, March of 2017. So, the old idea of buying a legacy standalone commercial virtualization platform with a separate management tier, buy and set up and all that, it's been gone out of the public cloud and out of what Nutanix offers for years now. So So we're a little bit back to that same situation still with people looking at, old world virtualization.
Yeah. Well, that's one nice thing about what we do, right? If you just hang around long enough, it'll come back around and it'll reinvent itself, and you can be the old guy that can say "I told you so," and actually mean it and enjoy it.
Yeah, one of my early customers at my Citrix partner business talked about Citrix as being 3270 with a GUI.
I said something similar to a new guy the other day. I told him it was just SSH. That's all it was. SSH with a GUI. That's all it was. Oh, it is. Still is. Kind of. I mean, that's where it came from, right?
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, we should probably have you on one of our Citrix walk down memory lane type things. We seem to do those once a year or so. So Steve, you have a blog that I'm not sure what date it came out, but I went back through some of the blog archives at Nutanix, and of course I was looking for a Citrix one because that's kind of where my world begins to coincide with Nutanix, but not limited to. And you wrote a blog at one point called 10 Reasons Why Nutanix is the Best Platform for Citrix, and I've been on that train for 8 years now, I guess.
Nice.
And I love showing people what hyperconverged just in general can do for a Citrix environment that grew up on servers with RAID cards in them, physical servers, and then maybe moved to some type of SAN technology. And all along, Citrix was destined to live somewhere else, and hyperconverged shows up one day and you're like, oh, that's it. That's where it was supposed to be all this time. Those desktops that moved into the data center, they needed something more scalable, something smarter, something more manageable, something more flexible, something more updatable, blah, 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 something more high performance. And then here comes Nutanix and hyperconverge, and finally it starts to all make sense. But how long has it been since you wrote that article?
I think it was around October last year, maybe.
Okay, so this isn't that old. I'm sorry, I haven't really scrolled through to find out the date, and I don't know that it's published on here. It might be about the bottom, but let's kind of talk through this. Jaira, anything specific that you want to make sure we cover as we're talking to Steve, and he tells us, what caused him to write this article and the points he's trying to make?
So the part that I love that jumped out at me, of course, to give the audience a glimpse, it's a top 10 list of why is Citrix and Nutanix such a great workload and they pair well together. And I love the point. It's so elegantly simple about the integrated DHCP, right? Because, we all, I'm sure, have those horror stories of the calls from customers where the lack of visibility into the DHCP scope sizes and leases and what's available when the desktop admin goes to say, I want 50 more desktops because this business unit put in the change request for it. And all of a sudden, stuff falls over because we didn't check. Do we have available IP addresses for those things? Just that it's another often forgotten integration of we can simplify that, give you more visibility into it, and again, try to avoid, painful downtime.
So you said something just now, and I don't think it's in the article. I'll go ahead and throw it out there. One of my favorite things about the hyperconverged stack is it's not the SAN, which means my Citrix admins, I can then go to them and their boss and say, let's own this whole stack. Let's own the whole thing other than the network tap. Let's own the whole thing. So DHCP's in our world, machine provisioning and resource allocation, that's in our world. And when it's broke, it's our fault, but at least now it's our fault. And now we don't get Citrix black eyes from all the other infrastructure players that we have no control over.
Sure, you can squint, right? And honestly present stuff in slightly different colors, right? It's just a bunch of servers, right? If you were running physical Citrix, you'd let us manage it all. Now we're running a storage layer, but it's not a SAN. We still get to manage it all.
So a guy I'm working with on another firm, he asked me the other day, what happened? Why did we end up with the legacy 3-tier in the Citrix world or in the entire data center? And I was like, well, at some point, businesses got smart and realized us IT guys were just spending all the money. So they put accountants in charge of us, and they made us all fit into the shoehorned us into a 3-tier architecture, even though people like Steve, I'm sure, even at the time said, man, this isn't the smartest way to run dumb old desktop workloads or Win32 application workloads. We're spending a fortune for this SAN for this thing. But yet, somebody that controlled the dollars and cents could put us all in one bucket and make us stay in that bucket. And hyperconverge allowed us to bust out of that, just like it allowed the cloud to bust out of that. So we have one other person who's joined us, Harvey Green. He was out playing golf, I think. He just joined the call. But Harvey's one of our lead sales engineers at XenTegra and runs a bunch of Nutanix shops. And after I convinced him, I'm joking when I say that, but after he got started here at XenTegra and started down the Nutanix hyperconverged path, he didn't take much convincing, but he's a big advocate of Nutanix for Citrix workloads, VDI workloads, virtual app workloads, and beyond. So welcome to the call, Harvey.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Hey, Harvey.
What'd you shoot?
Yeah, right.
We're technical guys. We don't have time to play golf.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
All
right.
So a really good golf playing robot.
Yeah. All right. So Steve, let's jump into, let's just jump into the introduction. I know we've kind of batted around the topic here a little bit. Is there something in the intro that adds a little more color into why you did this article versus all the great things we just talked about?
Well, I co-authored 5 books on Citrix over the years before starting my VMware consultancy, and then co-authored 3 books on VMware. Last year, wrote my first solo book, The ROI Story, Guide for IT Leaders. So I like telling stories about things, and the way I reason after I sold my Citrix business, I was not really looking to go back into the channel partner business again. A friend of mine showed me VMware vMotion and said, "Okay, I guess we got to do this." Looked at calculated the ROI and said, "This is crazy." Even with the cost of buying a SAN and hiring an administrator and all that, you still got to save money. And then after selling that business, I moved up to Lake Tahoe, where
Steve,
I was looking at.
I want to interrupt you real quick because I do want to ask you two moments in time. Do you remember the very first time you saw an application delivered seamlessly through Citrix and thought to yourself, "This is game changing"? Do you remember that moment?
No, because we started with Citrix so long ago. The OS2 version. I didn't. I mean, for us, it was just a replacement for Novell communication server.
Yeah.
And I'm not a techie guy. I ran the company. My background was not tech; it was all business. So no. What did impact me though was when WinFrame first came out, and one of our lead sales engineers was working on it. He said, "Hey, I think this product is so powerful. It means that customers aren't going to need to have servers in remote offices." And he's going, "I think it's so going to be so good that they don't even need to upgrade PCs." This was before thin clients or anything like that.
Yeah.
And that's when the light went off for me. I said, "Whoa, that means they could save all kinds of money."
Yeah, it's compelling.
Yeah.
It's a no-brainer. It's still a no-brainer. Now we actually have network connections that work. I mean, that was on, back in dial-up days and network connections and token ring and things that were down half the time. And when it did work, didn't work all that fast.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the reason I asked that question, because the second one, Steve, do you remember the first time you live migrated a running machine to the other one and the light bulbs that went off in that moment?
Well, again, it's not me that did the live migration. You would never want me to ever try something like that. But a friend of mine went to my house and set up a laptop and IP'd into the VMware environment you set up, and did the vMotion thing. And I said, "Holy cow!" So remember it very clearly.
Yeah, for our generation, those are 2 watershed moments of light bulbs going on. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. You were talking about the books that you'd written and how you got to the job and the role you're in now. Yeah,
so I moved up to Lake Tahoe after selling my VMware biz and envisioning this cushy consulting career. And a friend of mine at VMware VCDX said, "Hey, I joined this hot startup in the infrastructure space. I think you could be a good fit. Come interview." And I wasn't looking to go to work for anybody. I just moved up to Tahoe, but I met with the startup and they showed me their tech, and I was just blown away. And my first thought was VDI, and thought, "Wow, this could be a game changer." But then I thought, how often does a 50-person startup have a prayer against the handful of multi-billion-dollar Goliaths that have completely dominated not only the data center for years, but the reseller channel, as I knew full too well. So I didn't join, but as I watched Nutanix's explosive growth over the next year, I said, "Man, I think these guys have a real chance of pulling off one of the business upsets of the decade." So I gave up my dreams of a cushy consulting career and back to work 70 hours a week at a startup. That's almost 8 years ago now.
I think that's funny. You're number 11 on your list here. Number 11 on your list here. You're going to get to revisit that topic and point out the behemoths. I listened to a podcast yesterday on the guy who started Burton Snowboards and him trying to compete against the big ski makers in the play, Rosignol and some of the other folks, and how he knew someday they were going to catch on. But just like here, I think they just didn't catch on fast enough, and now they're having to, figure out a way, and some of that way is Nutanix, really. Okay, so let's jump into the first one. Let's see. I've already lost track of what it was. Nutanix improves user experience. I made the comment to one on my Citrix podcast earlier today. Happy wife, happy life. Happy users, keep your job. If you're a Citrix admin, user experience is paramount right here, right?
Yeah. When I was in after I sold my VMware consultancy, the company that bought us, we did a lot of VMware biz. That was in the infancy of VDI, but we're still pushing it. And what I noticed was that customers would deploy it, and it would work really good for the pilot, but almost too good, because then more and more users would want to come on. They want to run more and more apps, and the storage controllers of these SANs would start filling up, which tended to be more small size for an initial deployment. And so you start getting this inconsistent user experience. And like I wrote in all my Citrix books, it's better to have 100% mediocre user experience than a 98% good and a 2% mediocre, because users hate inconsistency. And so, back then it was VDI was, I wouldn't call it a joke, but man, certainly more deployments failed or stalled than were successful, I think. And it's because of this SAN-based architecture. I ran into it again and again and again. So when I realized that Nutanix could deliver this consistent user experience, whether they're running on 3 nodes or 300 nodes or 3,000 nodes, and never facing a forklift upgrade cliff, just all the challenges that SAN provides for virtual desktops all go away. I got very enthusiastic about it.
Yeah.
It is one of
Well,
those
and if
things.
happy users are job one, happy administrators are job 1A, right? Like arming those guys for how do I get the metrics of showing I'm delivering consistently and keeping users happy and so forth like that. And I think we offer just a wonderful blend of both. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things when I talk to people, I'm like, okay, so when you have a server app where it's a client server app and the server side of the app, nobody ever sees, they never know whether it's fast or slow for the most part. It might be microseconds of latency that might impact their performance. But when they actually see the app running on the server, if it's slow, they're going to know. If their logins are slow, they're going to know. And one of the best ways to kind of tell this story for me is, do you remember the day when you put an SSD drive in your desktop for the first time and this, oh my goodness moment? Well, that's what Nutanix does for a Citrix environment that didn't have it before.
Yeah, and you mentioned the aha moment of vMotion. I wouldn't put it quite at that level, but it's still a pretty notable moment for a lot of people. It's the first time they see Nutanix Prism and the elegance and simplicity of managing.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely is capable, but yet simplistic all at the same time. It's pretty awesome. It just being based on that web console and kind of a user-centric approach to begin with, it definitely, other than the VMware guys that know where all their bodies are buried, where all the pieces are in their console, when you come at it fresh, it's a no-brainer. All right, well, let's talk about number 2 here, where your topic is Nutanix scales simply and with consistent performance. That's a huge.
And let me just go back to one for one more minute, because back when after I sold my VMware consultancy, and the main VDI question I would get from customers is, should we go with Citrix or with VMware? And I'd always say that's the wrong answer. And today it would be questions like, what type of infrastructure should we put in? And again, I say it's the wrong answer. I take people back to the beginning. So why do your users use a computer? I mean, why not just a 10 key or a calculator or, a phone? Why give them this desktop computing at all? And so I like to start at the real basics and, what do your users do? How are they going to be productive? And then work our way back to the technology. But no matter how you frame it, clearly the user experience is pivotal. And like you said, if you have unhappy users, if you have 1,000 users and they're all working less productively than they should be, that's an enormous lost opportunity cost.
Well, to tie a thread there, even Wendy on our last episode mentioned, right, if I save she was talking about our internal users and all 7,000 of us, but if she saves every user 5 minutes, that's a remarkable return at scale.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can save them time and make them happy all at the same time, or happier, and if they're coming from an old legacy Citrix solution or VMware solution, or from an underperforming physical PC, without a doubt, you're going to make them more efficient, whether they realize it going into it or not. Okay, so Steve, the next section you have here is Nutanix scales with consistent performance and simplicity. Absolutely. You want to help us understand what you're covering there?
Yeah, first talking about a SAN challenge from a financial perspective. If you can kind of visualize, let's say you're going to buy a SAN today. I don't know why anybody ever would, but let's say you're going to buy a SAN for a VDI environment. You have to guess how many users you're going to have when that SAN reaches end of life. Let's say it's 5 years down the road. Then you have to buy, and what type of user applications you'll be running, and what's the OS going to look like, what type of resources you're going to need overall. And then buy a SAN with enough excess capacity in terms of storage bays and storage controller size so that you can meet those user resource requirements 5 years down the road. Because if you don't, you're going to face this very expensive and big and complex forklift upgrade. You're going to face it anyway after 5 years, but at least you don't want to have it after a year or two. So you have to buy a SAN with all this excess capacity up front, and you're paying for the rack space, the power, the cooling. And because it's proprietary, you just can't load new firmware in that SAN and have it run like a new SAN would. Probably won't run at all. And so the whole thing starts depreciating the first day you put it in. So by the time that excess capacity is fully utilized 5 years down the road, it's become really, really old technology. And that's if the capacity makes it that far. So Nutanix turns this whole model completely on its head. Start with as few as 3 nodes if you want, and then grow as quickly or slowly as you want, 1 node at a time. But as customers are expanding their footprint over time, hardware is getting faster, and it's getting more capacity, and so your CapEx is minimized up front. Your rack space, power, cooling, all the storage administration cost, all that goes completely away, and the storage network cost. And on top of all that, because the hardware is getting faster, your density of users per node continues to increase as you expand out your footprint. So you model this all out over a number of years, and it presents a really compelling TCO differentiator versus legacy SAN-based architecture, or versus business as usual PCs. And I actually have a patent pending around an algorithm I developed for how you model this out.
Yeah. And what you're really alluding to there is just the power of decoupling from the hardware in a software-defined world, which is what Nutanix did for this space, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, Harvey, you're in the trenches with customers. Are you seeing customers that are realizing this yet, or are they still just in version 1 of their Nutanix journey? And I say that kind of hesitantly because version 1 of Nutanix is often quickly followed up by version 2, which is that scale conversation he was talking about. You're seeing people that are on their 3rd and 4th time adding to their cluster?
So honestly, I'm seeing a lot of a mix right now. And the reason why is, as Steve alluded to, people have been so trained on, overbuying and making sure that you're buying day 1 for what it's going to look like in year 5, that, they're so used to overbuying from the top that, sometimes it takes some convincing and some conversation to get them to the point where you just buy what you need right now and maybe a little bit of growth, but you don't have to, break the bank right now. And I've still had customers even go the Nutanix route and still buy with the exact same strategy that they're buying for year 5 instead of buying for growth, because on their side, they also have, people in accounting that they're answering to, which is what you alluded to earlier. And the accounting people just want them to continue down that road until they, figure out what benefit this gets for them. So there's a little bit of that going on in a lot of my conversations too. But for the customers who are going down this route. I've got, one customer who's like really fully embraced this, and they basically they bought what they needed today. They planned for the next year to add another node to it, and for 2 years out to add another node to it, and kind of go through that cycle, so that not only are they taking care of their growth, but they're also ending up, by the time they get to year 5, year 6, they've also refreshed their hardware at the end of it. So they have a cycle that's going that will continue to help them for the future and continue to move throughout what they have. So it's less of a forklift upgrade cycle and more of a continuous evolution the whole way through.
Yeah.
Well, financially and technically, right? It'd be like if there was no reason to buy all 4 tires at once,
Right.
You would just buy them when you needed them. And we're getting to that point now with customers where what we told them when we first sold the cluster 5 years ago, now they get to see it in action, right?
Right.
No, you just buy the new nodes, you hit add cluster over here. Next week, you're going to hit eject nodes over here. And there is no step 3, right? It's really, really magical. It's very, very satisfying part of my job.
And they need fewer nodes than they bought 5 years ago. If they bought
Correct.
8,
Totally.
they
That's
probably
been a
need,
big one.
3 today or 4.
Totally.
That's been a big one.
5 years ago, I was so excited when I finally got this story across to a IT director here in the Carolinas. And I said, okay, now let's go talk to the CIO. And he says, you don't understand. He plays golf with the executive from EMC. He's going to get it, but he ain't going to change. I was like, oh, then it really came to fruition for me what some of the decision making is built around in the world we live in.
Absolutely.
Okay. So Steve, next section talks about improved performance. You're talking about shadow clones and data locality, really cool stuff, little techie, but things that make sense pretty easily. Go ahead.
Yeah, Jerry, you want to take that?
For sure. What I love about it is, of course, we've in the history of the company, we've gone from pursuing VDI as a core focus to VDI as something we do excellently among other focuses as well. And the way I tell my customers that is around the logistics of flash, right? The cost of flash. Back when we would design nodes that needed maybe 2 100 gigabyte SSDs, that is a very effective hot tier, but it's real tiny, right? All you can really do is cache, say, a gold master image for a VDI pool. I can't fit a lot of SQL on that. And so as flash has gotten larger, our platform stayed the same, but now we're able to effectively leverage larger flash. We can tackle any workload. And so that's why we have the longest history with VDI and delivering that effectively. We can put the data locally on the nodes. We're retrieving it across, the front side bus, i.e. crazy fast. And then every node, right, can hold a copy of that gold master image so that everybody can retrieve that very, very efficiently. And like we said before, contribute to that scale out predictability.
And I'm sorry if you said this, because where does M2 and drives like that start to kick into this? I mean, those are getting more and more cost effective and bigger at the same time, right? Where
sure. We have some nodes with some of our partners that I believe they only exclusively use M.2s. I think there's one node that uses like 4 M.2s for a robo installation because they're very, very compact. Ultimately, M.2 is the physical interface. It can still logically be, someone's going to write in and correct me on this, but I'm pretty sure it's just a physical interface. It can logically either be still, regular SATA controller-based communication or NVMe PCI-based communication. Ultimately, it doesn't matter, right? We help you take advantage of what's the latest and greatest tech at the best price point. Since we're software-defined and hardware agnostic, great, go for that.
Yeah. And data locality in particular is an advantage. I don't think any other HCI manufacturer has, right, Jira?
Right. For sure. Right. Data locality, it is the secret sauce, and we're not secret about it, right? It powers literally everything we do to say there's nothing faster in the data center than the connection from the CPU to its local storage, right? You just can't touch it. There's no fabric in the world that evolves fast enough to keep up.
And I'm doing a lot of work with HCI, but really storage, SANs, virtual SANs. And you're right. I mean, the idea of data locality, because of the way you guys have your controller VM on every single node, is certainly a benefit that people don't realize they're getting, not having to come back across the network to grab that data every time. It just makes things fast and very efficient all at the same time.
Yeah, we're a little precise that we never say virtualized SAN, right? Because we're virtualized storage, right? So the outcomes are the same or better, but we don't get there just by randomly shotgunning the data anywhere. Like the intelligent placement actually gives us a lot of horsepower.
Right. And Joe, I think that's the point of differentiation about Nutanix. Our roots extend from Google and the Google file system and using this web scale type of architecture, whereas essentially every other HCI solution there comes from virtualizing a physical SAN. So you're still dealing with RAID groups and all these legacy SAN type things that are in software, but just add complexity and lack of performance and lack of resiliency that we've architected away using this web scale. And that's why Nutanix, starting as a tiny little company, and now every leading storage manufacturer in the data center and dozens of other manufacturers all offer HCI solutions, and yet Nutanix has over 50% of the market.
And you guys started quite often in the VDI space, but you've continued to evolve to make that speed so that there's really no workload that you don't feel like you can. This is all about VDI and Citrix, this conversation, but high-end transactional Oracle database, SQL database, you don't think there's anything you can't get to at this point, right?
First HCI solution certified for HANA, right? That's almost basically the brass ring for performance, and predictability. And Epic, right? Yeah, for sure.
And the ironic thing is a lot of people, especially on the back-end application side, might scoff a little bit VDI, easy workload, small workload. For those of us in the industry, we know there's nothing more difficult to do well, because I don't care how good your back-end SAP environment is. If your users can't access it easily and simply and efficiently, you're going to fail. And yet you're dealing with users, not just their experiences, but also their perceptions. And you mentioned it earlier, Andy, about measuring speed and so on. So it's even there's the perception. Hey, my SAP is running slower than it used to. Well, you better be able to show them that the data and the evidence that shows no, that's not the case at all, or you have a good shot of failing. And so once you master VDI, all the other loads in the data center actually become a lot easier. And that just so happened we tackled the most difficult of all workloads first.
Yeah.
Well, scoff at VDI at your peril. It can generate plenty of resumes.
So, Steve, you mentioned earlier a POC with 5 users is easier than adding the next 5 or 10 users in a Citrix environment, right? When we're talking about VDI, we may not realize it, but they are comparing the performance of that virtual desktop to that $3,000 PC they got sitting at home that they just went out and bought themselves. Yeah. They don't make that known, but we don't know what their expectations are and what they're used to.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
they got a game.
Go ahead. I was going to say that brings up another point when we're talking about data locality and nothing being faster than bus speed. With that $3,000 computer that you're bringing up, that's running on bus speed. That's what they're used to. You can go and buy millions and millions of dollars of equipment to get the 10 gig, the 25 gig, the 40 gig to get to your storage back and forth. It's still not going to be faster than something that's sitting right there and processing on the same node that it has the storage.
Yeah, well, and that emphasis on the newness and staying up to date, right? VDI done well encompasses all the other best IT practices, right? We had an article last year about Goldmaster images being built with Calm and a Jenkins workflow, right? Like that's all of your best DevOps practices right there, so that whenever you need to spin up a new pool, you're cherry picking. Give me last night's build of the latest Windows updates, the latest app updates, always ready to go, and no human had to go build it, right? Like, yeah, VDI is a chance for the IT department to really shine with every best of breed skill.
Yeah, we got to keep moving on, but I will add one other comment to that. It is the place to shine, but it's not the infrastructure guys' typical focus. So they were happy just to shove us on some spinning drives on their SAN all day long. Mm-hmm. Here we are trying to justify our existence at the same time. It was not fun.
Well, we'll move on. But philosophically, right, VDI as an enabler versus a necessity, right? Like you can use it well or even better.
Yeah. Okay, so Steve, next one, vastly simplifies administration. You were mentioning Prism a while ago, Prism Central, empowering those Citrix and other VDI admins to have access to this kind of stuff and know how to use it without 3 weeks worth of training classes. Let's cover this one.
Yeah, I mean, exactly that, as well as what you said about controlling their own environment and not having to go to central IT to get the LUN they need or to get the more IOPS they require, in charge of their own destinies.
So one of the things that Jaira mentioned a minute ago, and I want to come back to really, is the performance piece. And I don't see much of this happening, but I love the idea of having centralized desktops, but for that fastest tier, that most important group of users, maybe using the Robo solution so that branch office, they get local VDI there, that if that's not available, they go back to the mothership for it. Or when they're coming in remotely from home or whatever. I don't see people taking advantage of that often. However, that is, if you've got some pesky users that you don't want coming across the WAN, you want real time, wire speed for the ICA protocol. The idea of the Robo out there for those users and performance is something I've always wanted to see somebody do.
We have customers that do it today. Yeah, they do. That do VDI at the edge, right? And they do it because they want autonomous, right? They want the WAN link goes down, but users don't notice, and back office systems just catch up that night.
Yeah. All right, so Steve, I want to see you answer this one. This is the Nutanix lowers cost, and Nutanix is much more operationally efficient, and there's still a CapEx spend potentially. It doesn't have to be maybe, but potentially. It's not cheap though, right? There's a value there, and I'm sure a lot of your day is spent trying to justify why somebody got in their head that Nutanix was just cheap, and it's not. It's a valuable solution. It has all kinds of scalability and performance conversation tied to it, but it's not cheap. It's still a very valuable solution that needs to be justified, and I'm sure you can do it.
Yeah, that's starting out and as a Citrix channel partner, started doing the ROIs way back then. In fact, Mark Templeton asked me out to breakfast, and because we were in a little shop in the northern corner of the Bay Area, and he goes, "How are you guys selling so much Citrix?" Yeah. And we said we use ROI, and so then Mark asked me to help the team develop their own internal tools, and he actually wrote the foreword to my book. It was very gracious of him. But yeah, still today, I mean, the two types of situations, now it's on a vastly bigger scale, but typically we're either comparing versus what we call three-tier environment, SAM-based environment. For example, we recently had a large financial institution, I'd say a whole lot of users. I mean, a whole lot. And, we showed them how much tens of millions in savings they would get by moving to HCI type of architecture. And so very successful. But, kind of going to the other extreme, going against business as usual. We had a healthcare organization last year, and only 1,100 users, not, fairly small, but growing very, very fast through acquisition. And so we did an analysis for them, showing them that by converting their physical desktops to virtual desktops, just in conjunction with the refresh rate, that they'd save $2.4 million over 5 years, versus about a $750,000 investment. So nice return. But what that didn't count was the fact that the physicians, and just looking at the physicians, none of the other clinical workers or anybody else, just the physicians, the fact that they could get faster login times, they didn't have to walk to dedicated CPOE stations or dictation stations. They're able to save enough time that they could see an extra patient a day. You multiply all the physicians by the revenues per patient over a 5-year period. That was $120 million in increased revenues over 5 years. So it's
not pocket change.
On top of the 2.4. So yeah, it's pretty easy to build a compelling yet conservative business case if you take the time to do the finances. And if you're going to do it on like Nutanix HCI, it's important to understand these concepts like Moore's Law and how you want to look at it over a time period, not just upfront cost of a SAN versus HCI. But Nutanix tends to have extraordinary value, and it's going to work well on top of that.
Right. Yeah. That was my thought. Was it's almost one of our most provable, right, proof points things, is because we've been doing it the longest with just phenomenal success. It's not a new workload for us.
Yeah, if you could save $2.4 million in infrastructure and OpEx costs, that's great. But if you can see $120 million of extra patient revenues, then that's really great.
Yeah, and I have to assume you guys have the ability to say, That's why they use it in the cloud infrastructure plays, right? And that hyper-converged story, those guys have to be uber efficient down to the penny. And they couldn't do it any other way, or they tried in the beginning to do it other ways, and the cloud didn't make sense. And then hyper-converged shows up, and all of a sudden it makes sense from an economics perspective.
Yeah, those really the other way around. Was the actual way it went is that Sergey Brin, the co-founder of Google, when Google was first getting going, back then it was called the internet companies that were the big sand buyers. This was before VMware in the late 90s, and so it was Alta Vista, Yahoo, and so on. And Sergey, for whatever reason, Yahoo offered him a tour of their data center. I guess they wanted to show off. They're the largest buyer of a particular SAN in the world. And Sergey was not impressed. He went back to his team and said, "Hey, what's going on with Yahoo and all those SANs? It's low utilization. They're hard to scale. They're complex. Because make sure Google, we don't do it that way." And his team said, "Well, there's no other way to do shared storage." And so Sergey said, "Well, figure it out." And so they hired a team of 8 scientists from prestigious universities across the U.S. who, for the first time, took a scientific look at IT infrastructure, and they realized it doesn't matter how much money you put into the hardware, it fails, it doesn't scale well, it's complex. So they abstracted all the intelligence out of these proprietary arrays, put it in the Google file system, and Google rocketed to the top of search. And it was that lead scientist of the group of Google scientists and 2 other co-founders who brought the same architecture to Nutanix. So that's where HCI came from. It actually came from the cloud provider space, at least the way Nutanix does it.
Yeah, without, you don't, yes, and then all you got to do is go look at how Amazon did theirs. They similar approach, right? They didn't go out and build a bunch of 3-tier pods.
No. Well, after Google pioneered it, every leading public cloud provider, even Yahoo, adopted the same type of architecture of aggregating local storage of commodity servers for their main hosting businesses.
Yeah, it's the only viable way to really achieve massive scale and drive towards like the admin per server ratio that you really have to get to be efficient. Yeah.
Okay, number 6, simplifies storage environments. I kind of think we were just talking about that a little bit.
Yeah. Just going back, one more point to your last comment, Andy, on HCI coming from the cloud. Now, of course, it's gone back the other way. So through Nutanix clusters, and that didn't make this list because clusters went GA after this list came out. Now we go back to let customers run Nutanix AOS in public cloud called clusters. So essentially, where they want to run VDI in public cloud, now they can do it extremely quickly. Same operating model, same IT governance, same security policies across both environments. In fact, they can have a hybrid cloud environment.
So, Steve, I want to talk to you about that at some point. I want you to help us understand how an on-premises Nutanix solution Monday through Friday makes sense, and then for the weekends you migrate a few desktops, turn all these off, and migrate maybe a few into the cloud, or vice versa. When you're ready to talk about that and have a blog or something to talk through, let's do that one for sure.
All right.
Okay, Nutanix simplified storage. I think we were just talking about what happened with the guys at Google versus the madness they saw over at Yahoo. You feel like we've covered that?
Yep.
Okay. And then Nutanix built-in file server. We're 2021. SMB shares still exist, and we still need those for our Windows workloads and the applications that run on those. And having that as part of the integrated system and really an entitlement of your license, there's value in that for sure.
Well, and Files just won some huge award yesterday. Jared, did you catch what it was?
I did, yeah. They launched, I'm going to use the wrong word for it, basically a Gartner customer sat rating for Files as a product, and it's, of course, stellar.
Yeah, like 4.8 or something like that.
Yeah, it was like 4.8, 4.9 out of 5, and it's really, friends tell friends you need to be using this, right? And that's the beauty of I think we would all agree for the most part, well-built VDI is probably non-persistent VDI. There's some exceptions, right? But for the most part, and the beauty of non-persistent desktops is where does persistent data live? It's got to go somewhere, right? And we can be a fantastic, integrated, simple, pleasing to use file storage solution.
and no separate hardware to have to buy, a NAS that you have to manage and maintain and upgrade and do and power and cool and rack and all that other kind of stuff. All goes
right,
away.
and everything we've said applies, right? High performing, no forklift refresh, right? Add nodes to scale only when you need to.
And
So guys, I
you
read
don't have to deal with other servers and dealing with replication and DFS issues and things like that. You already got something built in that you can use right off, that's right in front of you.
You sound like you used other stuff, Harvey. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and when you need to make that support call, you're not calling another company, you're calling the same company where this system's already living on. And, if that person doesn't know, they're going to get you to the team that does.
There is, it would be cheesy to say like, oh, but this is the Nutanix flavored solution. But that actually is a really meaningful outcome, is like, but you get to call our support for it. You can run Kubernetes like 18 million different ways. Don't you want to be able to call us when you have a question? Like, it actually has a lot of value to customers.
Well, I think there's somewhere out there's a skit where maybe not Nutanix, but you're saying, hey, you need to call this other vendor. And then you just put the phone on the other side of your head and say, okay, what can I help you with? We got you covered. Okay. So I was kind of reading ahead to number 8, and maybe you guys talked about, but file analytics is a growing space, and because Nutanix is very software centric, you got the data sitting there. You see the data flowing through your system. The ability to get into that place and continue to add more and more value around data analytics it's a no-brainer, right?
Yeah, the data about your data is kind of where the intelligence kicks in, right? What's hot, what's cold, who's got gigs and gigs of music stored in the file server. Hey, do you know this is all 5 years old? Let's put that on S3 storage somewhere, whether on us or public cloud, you choose. Let's be more intelligent and proactive with how we design our systems, right? So the first step there is get armed with data. Analytics does that.
Well, and the other thing is, because again, Nutanix has this web scale architecture, it's been possible for us to leverage on top of that to build all these, really great adjacent technologies like files, like Flow to do VM level microsegmentation. This is off here, but like Era for doing, lifecycle database management. And that's one of the great things about Nutanix. Our competitor out there, for example, their microsegmentation storage network. What's it called? Storage software.
Network virtualization and microseg. Yeah.
Yes. So it's a 127-page installation manual. 6 months. With Flow, it's a screen. It's literally a click to deploy it. So just this whole, when you come from this web scale architecture, just this whole different approach and simplicity in terms of putting in a really effective environment.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's what you cover in number 8, right? The micro segmentation and how you can put that in place to smartly and easily segment people away from each other and see what's going back and forth, right?
Yep.
Well, and recently that even got beefed up to be user aware. So when Andy logs in the desktop, he can get on any VLAN and go anywhere. When I log in, I'm a contractor. I can go nowhere. I get internet access only. And that, I think you guys keep me honest. You guys are the VDI design experts. That can let me run larger, fewer pools, right? And that yields even more efficiency out of the architecture, right? I don't need a contractor dedicated pool, right? So then my desktops are more reusable.
Well, that's one of the dirty little secrets in our business, right? You're taking people from the outside where you can kind of look at them from outside perspective, and you're putting them in the data center, in the bank vault with the money. Now you got to be smart about what you don't have. Now you don't have to put them in a certain corner. You can put them all over the place, but you can watch and figure out where they need to go and be smart about it. That takes my little corner bank vault story and it says, okay, you don't have to put them in the corner anymore. You just got to put them in the vault. Just now you tell them where they can go and where they can't go.
It's a vault in a vault. Yeah. It's vaults all the way down.
It's a software-defined vault. Okay, number 9 provides an encompassing data center platform. What are we covering there?
I think we covered that a little bit earlier. Basically, that Nutanix started with VDI, and customers do as well, but it's so easy to expand it now. And that's what happened in the beginning. Unlike, best practices for a SAN environment where you need a dedicated SAN for each environment, with Nutanix, you don't. You put in the architecture and the Prism, and now it's very easy to add nodes or add clusters for any use case throughout the organization, even now in the public cloud.
Yeah, that public cloud piece.
I was going to say that lowers the TCO that much more, right? Because you've already made this initial investment, and now it's just very inexpensive to add nodes on top of that, relatively.
Well, and then that public cloud piece creates the bridge. Like originally, it's like, hey, what happens when I'm done with Nutanix and hyperconverge and edge computing? All of a sudden, now I got the cloud. Well, now we can just come and go as we please because of that.
Yeah, same licensing. As long as you're buying CBL licensing on-prem, use that same licensing in the cloud. Use the same your cloud credits that you can use. And a little secret my team discovered is that for most workloads, you actually can run clusters in cloud for less money than you can run just public cloud. That's not necessarily the case with VDI, but for most workloads, that is the case. And it's because of the ability of clusters running on bare metal in public cloud to mitigate all of these cloud inefficiencies like t-shirt sizes and oversubscription limitations and so on. But it's pretty, it's not the main reason to use clusters. The main reason I think is to get the cloud fast and efficiently and without hiring more staff and all that. But, saving a significant amount is a nice icing on the cake.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a virtuous cycle of if it gets you there faster and has a better TCO, then the one hand washes the other for sure.
Hey, Steve, are you guys going to be able to I'll use the word fix, but are you guys going to be able to address the running in clusters for the VDI story, or is there just some theoretical limit that can't be overcome?
We just haven't done enough analyses yet to know. The one analysis we did do, we noticed that it was about even. We weren't saving, it wasn't costing more, including the price of clusters is about the same. But that was pretty starkly different than the other use cases we've examined. So I don't know the answer to that yet. I don't know if it's something, VDI tends to be typically a really predictable workload. And so there might be something systemic in the way it charges in public cloud that it's hard for us to mitigate. But I'll get back to you on that as we learn more.
Well, if it comes with the flexibility and the ability to get into the cloud and it's break even with a on-premises solution, and I don't have the expenditure up front, I think that probably is a win if you look at it with open eyes.
Well,
absolutely. And equally important, the ability to migrate those workloads. What happens if your public cloud provider starts competing with you, or they drop you, or they fail to meet their SLAs or whatever? You have the ability now to move back on-prem, to move between different public clouds.
Yeah, well, like D-Ridge always says, like data has gravity, right? So where are the apps, right? And the ability to put desktops next to those apps can be a real killer as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I use the Christmas presents the Christmas presents have to be where the kids are. That's my example.
Right.
All right, number 10, Nutanix provides more choice. And I think we've kind of covered that here, but it's almost limitless, wouldn't you guys say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's almost limitless proof.
Yeah. I mean, that's right. The sound of thinking doesn't make for good podcasting, but yeah, I mean, we can do, servers that are as small, nodes that are as small as like a decent laptop up to, huge, these new AMD sockets are ridiculous, so really anywhere in between.
So Steve, anything on number 10 that we're not covering here?
I think one of the primary benefits is choice of hypervisors, the ability to run, legacy hypervisors, the ability to run HV natively, your customer's choice. Now, going back to the cost realm, if you're paying $55 list cost for your hypervisor and 20% subscription a year for every Citrix user, and you can move to a hypervisor that's just native and integrated and simple and no cost, that makes a nice added TCO bump.
And truly supported by the person who answers the phone on the other side, that same phone number gets you to hardware support as well as hypervisor and AOS and I'll say virtual SAN support, but really that's not what you guys are. That's just extremely powerful, knowing that somebody's going to answer and they're going to help you.
Well, and Nutanix has a net promoter score of over 96 years in a row, which is just unheard of. And I can't vouch for this, but I've heard stories where customers do call Nutanix for their legacy hypervisor, and we support it because we can do it faster than their hypervisor manufacturer can.
Yeah. One of my favorite. I've only had one bad Nutanix support story, but hang with me. Let me tell the story. It wasn't bad. The guy helped me. He did everything he's supposed to do, but he did it so quick and efficient that we never even got a case open. All right, so Steve, this is supposed to be top 10, but you got a number 11 on here. I think the boys over at HP and the boys over at Cisco have caught on that they need to work with you guys, and if you're a fan of either or, then you can still be a Nutanix customer, right?
Well, certainly HPE. We have actually a tight relationship with them, and HP GreenLake is, customers are absolutely loving that, the ability to consume the hardware the same way they consume the software. Not as much with Cisco. I mean, we absolutely run on UCS, but nowhere near the level of partnership we have with HPE. Yeah.
Well, that's good. And HP knows they need your solution, and it's proven that it's the right one for their hardware platforms. They got great hardware, great distribution, great fan base, customer loyalty, and let's just throw Nutanix in the mix and make it the best of both worlds.
Yeah, it's been a really great partnership, and we've done a lot of nice big deals together.
Well, Steve, it's great catching up. I'll probably ping you after this and just maybe jump on a call and just talk through some of the Citrix old timer stuff. And there's probably a lot I can learn from you and your history. But I appreciate you joining, and I'd like to have you on again at some point.
Anytime, Andy. Really appreciate it. Harvey, same thing. Thank you so much for being on the call. XenTegra is a great Nutanix partner. You're everything I always wanted to be as a partner. Very deep focus and specialty, and great customer sat and execution. So really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, we do the one thing it takes, and that's we try, and we get up every day and focus on EUC, and Nutanix is a big part of that story these days for sure, and been a huge enabler and continues to be. All right, guys. Well, Jaira, Harvey, thanks for joining. Any parting shots before we go?
Shameless plug for a Nutanix bootcamp on the 29th of January, this Friday, that I'll be hosting with Merritt, who's also a Nutanix SE. So we have that going for us.
So once a month we take our education, Nutanix education, into the labs, and Harvey teaches a class on it. And if anyone's listening that would love to get ramped up on Nutanix and Citrix and integration of the two and how it all comes together, you get to sit there and watch and listen and ask questions as Harvey puts the peanut butter and jelly sandwich together.
Yeah, for sure. No, I'll plug that too, right? The hands-on experience is really how customers, see the difference, right? Like everything sounds great on paper, but once you touch it and see it, and wow, that was really easy, it's, eyes light up. So yeah, no, for sure. I'm all about get customers to that hands-on experience.
All right, gentlemen, I appreciate it. We'll do it again another time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Talk to y'all.